Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey. Welcome, Ed.
Hi, Coco. Nice to be here.
You've got a bit of a reputation as the fun guy of politics. I think, who could forget the bungee jumping and the paddleboarding stunts of the election campaign, which I have, just as a small tangent, I feel for you because I've got a reputation as being the fun party friend. And sometimes, you know what, Ed, I don't want to be that. I just want to be taken seriously. Do you feel the pressure?
Well, to be honest, most of my time in politics, I've been doing serious stuff, from the economy to health to the environment, whatever. And I take my job very seriously, actually. However, the key thing is I think you've got to make people laugh and smile and cry and get emotional about politics as well. And I think the problem is too many people on the left, on progressive politics, liberal left, almost take themselves too seriously. And I think that turns people off. And I think why I wouldn't ever want to ape their policies and values. If you look at what some people on the right are doing, they're engaging with people in funny ways that actually seem to be working. So I think if you don't try out different things and also be true to yourself, right? You know, I quite like having a bit of fun. I think, and you show that, then I think you've got a chance of grabbing people's attention. And I think it's a real failure of progressives that they haven't learned that from the likes of Johnson and Trump and others, frankly.
The authenticity thing is something that we've been talking about on this podcast a lot. And actually, you're now one of the few voices in Parliament that's willing to actually call Donald Trump out, to actually authentically say, no, mate, this is not really on. So on Monday, we heard that the US voted alongside Russia, Belarus and North Korea against a resolution in support of Ukraine. You called it a wake-up call to those cheerleading Trump in our country. So actually, my very first question, who are the cheerleaders? Go on, name and shame.
Well, they're pretty obvious, aren't they? There's loads in the Conservative Party, there's Reform, people in parts of the right-leaning media. And I think it's quite shocking. I think they haven't learned the lessons of history. They haven't looked at the facts in front of them. And I think particularly with Farage and Reform, the sort of the boot licking of Trump and the back slapping of Musk, I mean, it sticks in my core. I mean, I think it's probably turning some of their own voters off. It's quite shocking. I always thought he was a bit of a plastic patriot, to be honest. And the moment he seems to be doing Trump's bidding and doing what's in Trump's interest more than what's in the UK's interest. So he's hardly a patriot, is he?
What are you thinking about Labour, though? Because they're walking something of a tightrope. They have to show diplomatic support for the new administration, but they also want to stand up for Ukraine, but they're also quite clearly afraid of pissing off Trump. Would you count that as effectively cheerleading it on?
No, I think it's slightly different, to be fair to them. I mean, if you're in the UK Prime Minister, you've got to try to reach out to the President of the United States, whoever they are. And America has been our long-standing ally, right? However, and here's the difference, I think. Sometimes the best way to talk to a friend is to be very clear and candid. And if you look at Trump in his history, if he smells weakness or desperation, he'll just walk all over you. And I think, although he won't like it, I think being clear and strong, showing you have alternatives, like working with our European colleagues, working with our Commonwealth colleagues in Canada and India and so on, I think that shows that we're not so reliant on him as he thinks we are.
But I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head that he's someone who is personality driven. He likes to work with people he likes. And so there is always a risk if you stand up to him and tell him some hard truths. Perhaps he'll respect it, but perhaps he wouldn't. I mean, this might be a problem that you face yourself. So I noticed that Elon Musk recently called you, and we quote, a snivelling cretin. Congratulations on that, by the way. I think if Elon despises you, you're doing something right. You know, if you found yourself having to work with his administration, what would you do? Surely there'd be consequences to the outspokenness.
Well, here's a few things. J.D. Vance, not someone I would normally reference, but the vice president, he did call Trump Hitler in the past, or the nearest thing America had to Hitler. And he's now his vice president. So Trump's quite easy to get over this thing, and he will get over it. And if you make it clear that you'd like to be his friend, but if he plays the fool and is a bit of an idiot and sells America short and sells America's allies short, that you're not going to play with him today. I thought Macron didn't do too bad at the Oval Office of the day. So I think it's possible to do it. You know?
And he does seem to like Macron as well. So that doesn't seem to have have backfired.
I mean, what Macron was doing was pouring praise and sycophancy and then very carefully saying what he wanted to say in Trump's hearing when they were both on camera. I thought it was quite a masterclass, actually.
Let me talk to you about defence spending, though. So you've been saying that spending needs to go up. Today, the government announced plans to do just that, promising 2.5% of GDP. The big surprise, though, in Starmer's speech was how he intends to pay for this increase. Mm-hmm. So it's our international aid budgets. It's obviously attracted immediate criticism from organisations like Save the Children. They've called it a betrayal of the world's most vulnerable children. What do you think of this?
You're right. We have been arguing for higher defence spending, and that bit of the statement we support. But we had put forward other ways of funding it. Mm-hmm. So we had said you could increase something called the digital services tax, which is a current tax at 2%. We reckon put it to 10%. It hits 20 multinational companies, extremely profitable, well-off companies. Quite a lot of them are US tech companies. I'm sure they're willing to pay for the defence, and obviously they're very rich, so I hope they don't mind supporting the poorest in our world too. So here's an alternative. I've got two others that he could have looked at and he didn't talk about today. All those Russian assets that are in our banks, we've seized them, but let's confiscate them. Let's actually turn them into cash. There's over £22 billion of Russian assets in the UK alone. And there's been talk of working with European colleagues for a European rearmament bank, like we had after the Iron Curtain was raised. So there are other ways of doing it, quite serious, well-considered ways, and that would mean you wouldn't have to take the overseas aid money away. And let's face it, I think it's quite a short-term approach doing that, because who's going to fill the gap when that money goes? It's going to be Russia and China. You know, the US has already pulled out in a massive way. If we pull out as well, we'll maybe take other Western allies with us, and the gap will be filled by our enemies. Long term, it's really bad defence strategy.
Do you think it's genuinely possible to put money into defence and not feel the pinch at home? Because, look, all the polling suggests that the reason people are losing faith in the government and politics in general is because of the cost of living. And I think there will be some people in some parts of the country who, rightly or wrongly, will say, hang on a minute, why are we paying for a conflict that's really far away when in my neighbourhood there's so many children and so many things that need fixing? I mean, are these two things at odds?
Well, I mean, as I've just explained, we've found ways which wouldn't hit ordinary people. But let me give you other ways as well. I mean, you know, I think this government's generally been quite timid in its relationship with Europe. Mm-hmm. Two issues we've been campaigning on in this parliament have been the idea of getting rid of all those trade barriers that the Tories put up, that have made trading almost impossible, and impossible for some small and medium-sized countries, firms in the UK. And that means we're growing less strongly. There's less money going to the exchequer as a result. So let's have another customs union like we used to with the EU. Let's have a youth mobility scheme. I mean, you know, the EU put it on the table. We say yes. Let's do that too. These things would grow the economy, and it's the growth that actually is the fundamental problem for our exchequer. Okay,
well, putting aside the pinch that could be coming or shouldn't be coming, I feel like to say that you're anti-war, if you said that out loud, people would just scoff at you and laugh at you. This is ridiculous. What a terrible perspective to have. But there is just something here where, you know, an increase in defence means we're becoming a bit more militaristic. We're becoming a bit more war ready. And on a personal note, that does make me a little bit anxious. You know, what does it mean to be anti-war in this day and age?
First of all, the reason I really strongly support increasing our defence, working with our European colleagues and others, is because that's the best way to avoid war. If Putin thinks that you're strong, he won't come and attack you. And I know that sounds odd to some people, but actually it's been proven over many, many years, many, many countries. If you're strong, they won't come in for you. So that it's the way to avoid war, first of all. I think the second thing is, because different wars you should respond different ways. So, you know, Harold Wilson back in the 60s was right not to join the Americans in the Vietnam War. Absolutely right. Liberal Democrats voted against the Iraq War.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, famously.
Bad war. There was no justification for it. And it actually turned out very badly, completely disrupted the whole of that region of our world and led to more wars and more killings and more terrorism. So individual decisions, you have to take judgments on the basis of that. So we were really clear we should be supporting Ukraine. And I'm really clear we need to build up our defense because Russia is a threat. I don't think that's disputable, whether you're from the sort of progressive left, liberal centre, or wherever you are on the political spectrum, frankly.
It is strange though. Like I can feel myself sometimes when I'm talking about like, can't we all just get along? That I'm like, trying to put flowers into machine guns or something, which seems all very passé. Nobody's doing that anymore. But it does feel like the global temperature is rising in terms of aggression, in terms of the prospect of war. I mean, how worried are you at the moment?
I am worried. I've been worried on the Ukraine front for some time. I've been worried about what's happening in Gaza and the West Bank. I'm worried about what's happening in Yemen and Sudan. I mean, there's wars in many parts of our world which are horrific, and millions of people are losing their homes. Tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, have been killed. So it is shocking. You're right to worry about that. But the question is, how do you respond to that?
Okay, what about being more neutral?
Well, in any one circumstance, if that's the way to promote peace, I'm for it. But I don't think Russia, and certainly Vladimir Putin, is going to take much notice of neutrality, frankly. And if you look at the human rights abuses, I mean, they killed innocent citizens in their attacks. They keep doing it. They're abducting children, taking from Ukraine to Russia. They're behaving in the most appalling ways, war crime after war crime. I don't think neutrality is the right response to that. I think being tough-nosed and hard, because this man is a war criminal. He'll go down in history equivalent to Hitler and Stalin and all the rest of those dictators that brought so much misery. And the only way you deal with them is to be strong.
I just felt I had to ask that for all the pacifists listening in.
Well, I respect their views, okay, and I understand that. But I'm afraid I don't think, faced with people like Putin and people like Hitler, that's sufficient. So
Starmer is meeting Trump on Thursday. If you were in his shoes, shaking his hand with an iron grip, what would you say to him?
I'd say, hello, Mr. President. How are you? Good to see you. I'd compliment him in some way. And then I'd sort of try to find a way to win him over gradually. I'd be looking at the tapes of what Macron did. I'll be talking to President Macron, because I did think he played it pretty well. I think that's quite stylish from the French president, and that's what he's got to try to do.
Well, I mean, if you want a suggestion from me, I know he's a big fan of the royals, and there's so much great royal goss out there.
Hey,
affairs,
now.
So many affairs, secret children. You just need to get yourself on Reddit, Ed, and you'll find it. And that's the way.
You're on something, because I actually said in the speech, even before he was inaugurated, that we should offer him a state visit.
Yeah.
A banquet at Buckingham Palace, because I think you're right. I think he loves all that stuff. He loves the king, and yeah, you're right. But I said you had to get something out of it, because this guy's transactional, right? He just does deals. And so the deal would be, you can have a state visit and supper at the palace, but you've got to do X, Y, and Z.
I just have this vision of the Trump baby blimp being brought back. Probably not the best idea.
Well, you could ask him, and how much do gold toilets cost these days? The king wants to know.
The price of gold, by the way, is very high. Just letting you know. It's something that I know. I'm Asian. These are things that I know. Sir Ed Davey, thank you so much for joining us on Pod Save
You're very
the UK.
welcome. Nice to talk to you.